kind of an introduction. My name is Katrina Wiley. I work currently over in the Student Records and Registration Office as the administrative assistant. Some of you are probably wondering, what does somebody with emergency or that works in the Student Records Office know about emergency preparedness? A little bit of my background: I grew up in a family that is very much oriented to emergency preparedness. My father was an EMT while I was growing up. We had a major flood in my area down in Utah when I was growing up in the early 80s. So that was all part of growing up, being prepared, as well as my parents are both emergency preparedness specialists in our ward. I had served with Madison County Search and Rescue for the last 18 years as a volunteer. Also, I've been what they call a building safety coordinator here on campus for about 14 years. I've currently worked on campus for 21. So that's where a lot of my background with emergency preparedness comes from. Also, my husband and I have done kind of the medical needs for our Stakes Girls Camp for the last 15 years, minus last year and this year, as because of COVID, we haven't been able to go. So to start off with, what we're going to talk about today is emergency preparedness at work, in your office specifically. This kind of came up several years ago. Somebody in our office had read an article and had seen what the registration office down in Provo had done, and decided that maybe we needed to do something in our office. And so we started looking at different things, put together a committee. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the training that we have in our office and how we came to make decisions about how we were going to work things. So to start off with, we're going to be talking about the where, when, why, who, how, and what about preparing an emergency plan. So to start off with, you need to be thinking about what areas should I create a plan for? What areas need to be looked at? You need to look at your home. That's always a big one. We're always talked about emergency preparedness in the home. Traveling. Have you ever considered doing an emergency plan when you're traveling? That's something that a lot of people don't think about. And the big one we're going to talk about today is work. Creating an emergency plan for work. Members of the church have been counseled for many years to be prepared for adversity. We often translate this counsel to mean preparation at home. However, many of us spend more of our daytime hours away from home, some of which is in the workplace. So that is also something important. So sometimes our offices are another kind of a home away from home because we do spend so much time here. I'm going to give you a quiz. I'll put up the poll here. When do disasters happen? After the local authorities have sent out a warning, with little or no warning, or when I am at home and have everything ready? Give you just another couple of seconds here to put your vote in. When do these happen? Okay, I'm going to end this. With little or no warning. That is true. We don't usually have any warning. We don't know when the earth's going to shake or when we're going to have different disasters happen. Flooding, sometimes we do. A lot of times we don't know when those are going to happen. So when do you need to be prepared? If somebody wants to answer this, when do you need to be prepared?
Before the emergency.
Before, okay. You need to be prepared now. That's the big thing, is you've got to prepare now. Because you never know, like we said in the original question, is we don't know when it's going to happen. So you've got to be prepared now. So the big question is why do I need to be prepared? No, my neighbor is. They're ready. So why do I have to be prepared? I can have somebody read this first statement for me. Lavona, could you read that for us?
Personal preparedness lessens the impact on families, workplaces, and communities.
That's the big reason right there. If you're prepared, there's going to be less of an impact on your family or your workplace or within the community. If you're ready and have everything you need or prepared to expect what to need, then the city or the county isn't going to have to worry about you. They can take care about those others who are not ready. Can I have somebody read this one? Anna, would you read this?
Yeah. We do live in turbulent times. Often the future is unknown. Therefore, it behooves us to prepare for uncertainties.
That was President Monson back in General Conference back in 2004. And then this is my favorite scripture. It always has been. This is Doctrine and Covenants, section 38, verse 30. I tell you these things because of your prayers. Wherefore treasure up wisdom in your bosoms. If ye are prepared, ye shall not fear. If we're ready for things, we can anticipate those things that may be coming up. Or if something does happen and we may not be quite prepared, we will be still somewhat prepared for it mentally. Could I have somebody read this? Christy, would you be willing to read this for us?
Yes, hold on just a second.
Okay.
Sorry. Some church members opine that emergency plans and supplies, food storage, and 72-hour kits must not be important anymore because the brethren have not spoken recently and extensively about these and related topics in General Conference. But repeated admonitions to prepare have been proclaimed by leaders of the church for decades. The consistency of prophetic counsel over time creates a powerful concert of clarity and a warning volume that far louder than solo performances can ever produce.
Okay, this was from Elder Rednar, just in our last conference. If you remember with his talk when he talked about finding some of his food storage that they had forgot about and considered it hazardous waste. So just because the brethren have not talked about it in recent conferences, it doesn't mean that it's no longer important. As we saw the last quote in the last slide from President Monson, that was back in 2004, and there's other quotes before that talking about the importance of being prepared. So here comes the next question. Who do I need to prepare for? That's the big first thing that we looked at as an office is who do I need to be prepared for? First, yourself. You've got to prepare yourself, whether that be physically or mentally. You've got to prepare for yourself. Second, you've got to prepare for your coworkers or help them prepare, because if you're all prepared as one, it'll make things easier in the case of a disaster or a situation. For students, you need to help your students within the office or in your classrooms prepare for things, because you never know what's going to arise. If you are prepared, you can better help them as well. Have you ever thought about your family concerning what you're prepared for at work? If your family knows how you're going to be prepared at work, it's a great comfort to them if something does happen. So it all starts now is, how do I prepare? How do I go about this? It seems so daunting. Where can I find things to help me get prepared? Well, there's multiple resources out there. You can look online, talk to with your family, friends, see what they're doing, get ideas from them. Family discussions. This is great family home evening ideas, because when you're talking about preparedness in your families, it may bring up ideas for your office or your workplace. Or vice versa, something that you're talking about in the office could relate to something that you're doing or not doing at home. Staff meetings or trainings. This is the best place to get that information. Like this class is learning from somebody else's experiences, their successes or failures. What didn't go right? What did go right? So that's some of the things that you can do to prepare. So we're going to talk about kind of how the Student Records and Registration Office went about this. We're creating a general plan. You have your specifics and you have your general area. And to start off, we're going to talk about the general areas that you need to look at preparing for. First things we're going to look at in a little bit more detail here in a minute is evacuation and escape routes and meeting locations, your personal preparation and first aid supplies, and then the disasters during the situations before, during, and after, what you need to do to prepare. So we're going to talk about meeting locations. What is the value and purpose of having evacuation and escape routes? This is open to anybody to answer. What's the value of it?
I remember when the Teton Dam broke, and my father went out trying to find his relatives, his cousins and that in the Burton area and there was no idea where to find them. And it took a week, a few days to find them. Also, if you do a head count, you know somebody's not where they in a burning building.
Okay. Anybody else on having what's the value of having an evacuation and escape routes?
The less decisions you have to make during an emergency, the better, because your brain has a harder time thinking when it's put under pressure. And so if you don't have to think and you just know where you're going to go, then that's the value and purpose of having it.
Yep, exactly. If you have that set in your mind and you know what you need to do, you're not going to freeze. You'll be less likely to freeze in that instance. Okay, why is it important? What's the value and purpose of having a meeting location? Somebody kind of brought this up, but what do you think? What's the reason for it?
This is Chantal. Anyway, every time the buzzers go off on the MC and we all go out to the same place, I've got my emergency folder and I have my list of the 45 students and their shift times, and I have all of the full-time people. And so I assign my student secretary to do one and I do the other, and in an instant we can check and make sure that everybody's taken care of. And there's, one time, oh, we're missing this person. And so it's very handy for ease and for quickness of checking.
Exactly. You don't have them scattered everywhere trying to figure out where everybody went. It's exactly the big reason right there is then you can do a head count and make sure that everybody got out that was supposed to be there. So I'm going to show you talk about some different things when you're doing an evacuation and escape routes that you need to consider. First thing is you need to determine multiple routes. Why is this important? Why do you think we need to come up with multiple routes?
Because if one of your routes gets blocked for some reason, then you need to have backup routes. Exactly,
because you never know in the case of the disaster what's going to happen and what's going to be the situation. Okay, and when you're setting up these evacuation and escape routes, some things you need to ask yourself is, first thing, do we need to evacuate? If it's a winter storm, do you need to evacuate your office? No. If it's a fire, yes, you need to get out. Other question is, can we shelter in place? So like with the winter storm, yes, we can shelter in place, and that's going to be our best option. We don't want to evacuate. So this is one of student records and registration. We have two routes, a primary and a secondary route and meeting location. So our first route is we would go out our main door and take a right and go out this way. One thing to remember is a lot of these things also have been pre-decided by the university. They do have an emergency committee and they have an emergency operations plan, or they call it an EOP. And they preset on some of these. You can talk to campus safety about what your first exit is. And 99% of the time, it's going to be the closest exit to your office. In that case, it is the one for us that comes out right between the Taylor and the Kimball building. And then we head over to our meeting place. We have a specified, it said this exactly, we even have a picture of it in our training that's part of our onboarding that tells the students, okay, it's right here. We don't just say the Taylor quad. That's a big area. So we tell them specifically. The other reason that we have this route, other than it being closest, is there could be fewer people. You're not going to have as big a congestion going out that door. But our second one does come over here to one of the main entrances that comes right straight out into the quad. That is a backup in case for some reason this is blocked. Say there's a fire in the mechanical room for the phone system over here by the bathrooms. This gives us a secondary route to get out without as big a problem. Our secondary route, again, is our first, it's similar to our first route. We go out the west door, but it goes over to the pavilion. And this is in the case of there's a problem between Kimball and the Taylor. For instance, if there's a fire in the Taylor or in the Kimball building, and there's fire trucks over here in the quad, that's the last place that we want to be. We do not need to be right in the middle of them trying to fight that fire. We want to be out of their way. And then again, the second route has us over here. And our spot is over in the pavilion so that we can, again, get our head count and make sure everybody is there. And again, all of these are part of our training that we have as part of our onboarding for our employees, whether it be full-time or students. Next thing that we ask of our students or employees in their onboarding is to look at personal preparation. And these are things we ask them to consider. Do I have a change of clothes, shoes, and socks if needed? If the weather's bad and you're in a skirt, and you've got to shelter for a while at the office, do you really want to be laying around in your skirt or so forth? Do I have a small flashlight easily accessible? We get power outages, and if you're in some of the internal offices that do not have windows, yeah, you've got an emergency light most of the time. Sometimes those do fail and you do want a flashlight. This is something my husband learned for a long time, but he really saw the value of it. He carried a small one in his temple suit up there because they did have power outage, and sometimes those hallways do get dark. And then you can better help those that are with you as well. Do I take any medications on a regular basis? If so, do I always have several days worth with me? If you're stuck at the office for a couple of days and you're on high blood pressure medication, do you have it with you to make sure that you've got what you need and your health doesn't impact everybody else in a situation? Something, a big one to consider. Have I been trained in first aid and CPR? If not, get trained. School does offer this. I think it's about once or twice a month they offer it. You can sign up through the ticket office. If you just go to the ticket office website and search up first aid, you can go take the class. It's first aid and CPR. Along with that, do I know where the AED is in my building? How many of you know what an AED is and how to use it? This is the automated external defibrillator. Most of them that you get, they will walk you through, but do you know where it is in your building? Do you have easy access to it? You can't always depend on somebody else knowing where these things are. What supplies do I have in my car if I'm stuck on campus for several days? Do you have a small 72-hour kit? If it's a major situation, the university will step in and take care of it if it's going to be a long period of time. But on a short-term basis, you're kind of on your own because they are trying to take care of the students, and it would be beneficial if you could take care of your own. Do I keep my cell phone charged or have an alternate way to charge it? This is a big one. If the power goes out and you're stuck here on campus in a winter storm and you still need to communicate with your family or emergency personnel. This is something that my husband and I have learned with some of our training with search and rescue. Cell phone text messaging usually will work when normal channels are overloaded or busy. If you've got one bar and you can't make a phone call, you can get a text message out. We've found this out up in the hills, that you can still get a text message out to people, even though you cannot make an actual phone call, because it takes their short bursts instead of a lot larger trying to reach it. This is a big thing that a lot of people don't think about within your own office, is your first aid supplies. First thing is, does your office even have a first aid kit? Something to look at. If they do you know where it's kept if you need it?
Okay, Katrina,
Yes.
I know that safety and security have tried to maintain all the boxes throughout campus.
Mhm.
They kind of want everybody to use those boxes. So I would check with Eric Harmston on
Okay.
what he would like us to do with that type of situation.
Okay. And this is the other big thing. Do you know if it's maintained? What was the last time that somebody looked at the Band-Aids or things like that in your first aid kit? Now, the next part is what we have done to teach our students in our office about our first aid supplies. In it, we show them exactly where it can be found in our office with an explanation and a picture of what's in that drawer. We also have a secondary first aid kit. It's a little bit bigger, and this one goes with us when we evacuate. Every time that there's a fire drill, every time that goes off, it goes with us. And there are people assigned to take it. Starts off with myself, and if I'm not there, then it goes to the next person in the office next to mine, and so on. But it always goes, because what is in there is also, like Chantel said, we have a list that I print off every semester showing all of our students and what their shifts are, so that when they go out, we ask each of the students to report to their coordinator or supervisor, let them know that they are there, and then they report to their manager or associate registrar, who then reports to Lori, who is the registrar, to make sure that we have everybody out. That helps us to know, and then if there is still somebody missing, we can refer that to the emergency personnel, that we still have somebody in the building. One of the reasons we have this big backpack, other than having that folder in there, is if there is a major case, we can utilize the supplies to help those around us. If there's a disaster, emergency personnel are going to be stretched very thin. There is always a joke. A lot of people I know that tell me, well, if there's a disaster, I'm coming to your house. Well, I tell them, guess what? I won't be there. I will either be on the university helping, or I will be helping the sheriff's office with search and rescue, whatever, where I am asked to do. So by having this takes the weight off of EMS, because you can utilize what's in there to help and don't have to wait for EMS to show up. So we're going to talk about setting up specific plans, exactly what you need to look at when you're doing the specific things for different situations or disasters. First, you need to look at the relevance. Is this something we need to worry about? Do I need to set up a plan in Rexburg, Idaho for a hurricane? No. What do you need to do, or what can be done before to prepare for something? What do I need to do during that? Or what does my team or my office need to be doing? What about after? So I'm going to go ahead and go through some of the things that we looked at to determine some of ours, and I'll show you one of ours, what we have actually set up. The first thing we did is looked at relevance. Okay, fires, that's relevant. Why? Well, there's house fires, there's wildfires. Those things could impact campus possibly, or impact you yourself because of the proximity to campus or home. And work. How many of you were here when the Sporey building caught fire, when they were demolishing it back in 2000? I remember looking out my window during the night and seeing this big glow over toward campus, and I thought somebody had left the lights on the stadium. Next morning, I found out the Sporey building was on fire. I happened to work at the other end of campus up in the continuing ed department, so it didn't impact me, but it did impact those that were over in the Snow and the Romney and the Clark and the Kirkham at the time. So what would you do if the building next to you caught fire? Yes, Lavona.
No, you
Over
just
here.
asked how many of us remembered,
over
and I
here.
raised my hand.
And okay. So the next thing, flooding.
Katrina?
Yes.
There was a question about if we could get a list of what is in the backpack, in your
Okay.
emergency backpack.
I can try to put something together. It's one that we bought off of the internet. And we've added a few other things, like it didn't have a box of gloves, and we've put a box of vinyl gloves in there, a few things like that. But I can get you the information on where we got that. And then you can look at the list of what, because they have different sizes. That's the thing too, is look at the size of your office. How big, how little do I need?
Thank you.
Or does your department need? Flooding. Teton Dam flood that affected campus. Think about all the people that had to they put up here in the housing. How many of you remember this flood? Rexburg, 25th or 2014, July. This was not expected. This came out of nowhere. National Weather Service didn't even have it on their radar. All of a sudden it was sitting over campus and dumping. This waterfall here, that's down by the Snow Drama Theater. This is the Man Mooring Center. If you guys down below where the foosball tables and all that are, that was what it looked like. So flooding is something that can happen, even though we're clear up here on the hill. It will impact us. Winter storms. Yeah, we live in Eastern Idaho. It's gonna happen. Yeah, you're still coming to work, right? It's my husband's goal is to have enough snow that he doesn't have really an excuse to go to work, because we own four-wheel drives.
Katrina?
Yes.
I remember we had somebody in our office, and he lived up by the water towers. He said, well, if there's a storm, then I can just walk home. No.
That's true sometimes.
You've got to be real careful. Just because you live in town doesn't mean you can get to your home, or that you should be trying to get to your home.
No, you don't know what the roads are going to be like. You don't know. You've got to look at so many different factors. So, and we live outside of town. We're just north of Bear World, but we both own four-wheel drives. And there's a lot of times that our driveway does get blown in, and we just bust through it. And that's my husband's goal is, he remembers the snowstorms of, not getting a foot or more sometimes. He grew up here in Rexburg, so. Earthquakes around here? Yeah, Dallas, 1983. I remember that. I grew up in Utah, but I remember this one because I remember about 2 children being killed, and it was felt over here. Hebgen Lake, 1959. That was a 7.3. It was felt down here. This one is a little bit close to home. My mom's cousin and her husband were involved in it. Both of them were killed, and she's still buried up there somewhere. We just had this one a year ago over in central Idaho. It was a 6.5, and it was felt over here. My husband and I happened to be coming into town that evening, and we were sitting at a stoplight in our Jeep and sat next to a semi, and this, what we thought was a big wind gust, and the Jeep moved. Well, we happened to have the radio on, and a couple minutes later we realized, no, that was not the wind. So it's here. How many of you are aware that there is a fault line that runs right through the middle of campus, right through the middle of the Hart building? So it can happen here on campus. What's your plan? It is relevant. Tornadoes and windstorms. Yeah, the wind never blows in Rexburg. Idaho's not known for tornadoes, but we see an average of 5 per year, is what the National Weather Service is saying. Yeah, it's not just Kansas anymore. Well, this is one of the plans that we set up in our office. This one is about fires. We've put some links on there for additional resources that the students can go look at, or our employees. Red Cross has got some, NOAA's got a good website. So the relevance that we talked about is Fires can be caused by many things, and knowing what to do in the event of a fire is important for our safety. Did you know that if a fire starts, you may have just 2 minutes to escape? Well, what are the things that we can do beforehand to prepare for a fire? We have some cubbies in our office, and we've asked that all backpacks and bags should be stored in the cubbies so they're not sitting out in the walkways and people aren't going to trip or get caught up in those. Ask them to check around their areas. Or is there anything that could start a fire? Do you see any frayed cords or overloaded plugs? Are the bin lights turned off when leaving for the day? If you've ever noticed, sometimes those can put off quite a bit of heat. And depending on how things are above them, it could cause a fire. Be aware of the established evacuation routes and the meeting locations. That's part of the thing that's the before, is be aware of those things. Keep heat producing equipment away from anything that might burn. What am I supposed to do during the fire? We ask them to exit the building as quickly and orderly as possible. And we ask them not to run back to their cubbies and get everything. This just makes things a little bit more orderly. You don't have everybody rushing to the cubbies at the same time. And then using the established evacuation route or alternate route. Or in some cases, if there is somebody of authority that tells them to go another direction because they may know something that we're not aware of. And then go to their designated meeting location. What do you do if you catch on fire? The old rule of stop, drop, and roll. Some are not aware of this. And then what do you do after? What am I supposed to do now that I'm outside? Well, it tells them, once you're at the meeting location, they need to report to their supervisor immediately and then inform them that you're out and wait to receive further instruction. And we tell them, do not leave without notifying your supervisor. And if they're not available, they need to go to the next one up. That way, like we talked about before, we can account for everybody, making sure that they are getting out and we haven't left anybody behind. I know I give some of my people a bad time because they've got people working odd shifts that they haven't told me about. But in case of emergency, how am I supposed to know if they were supposed to be on shift that day? If they've told me one thing and the student's doing something else, it throws it off in case of an emergency, not knowing where that student is. Are they home or are they stuck in the office? Are they buried under rubble in a case of an earthquake? So things like that are important. Elder Perry, in a talk back in 1985, said, start now to create a plan. If you don't already have one, you need or update your present plan. The instability in the world today makes it imperative, and we need to take heed of the counsel and prepare for the future. This is the big thing, is we've got to be prepared. And if we're prepared, things are going to run more smoothly. We're not going to run into the problems. We're not going to have the issues if we are prepared. Something you can do as part of your plan, or looking at things, is run scenarios through your mind. Here's some examples. So you saw on the news that there was an earthquake in California. What are you going to do if this happens at work? This is something my husband and I do when we see situations or hear about things, is we run these through our minds going, okay, if this was my office, what am I going to do? How am I going to react? You saw on the news that a major storm was going to impact the East Coast with possible power outages for several days. What would you do if you couldn't make it home because of the storm? Run those type of things through your mind. What am I going to do? How am I going to react? What can be done? Joplin, Missouri was hit with a major tornado. There was severe damage to the LDS chapel. Members hid in the bathroom and survived. What would you do if you were at work and this happened? What's your protocol? Are you going to go sit right next to the window and stand there and watch it come in? You've got to make some plans. One of the big things too is you've got to have the mindset of preparation. Always be thinking, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? Something to keep in mind is you can't plan for every situation. You've got to learn to improvise. But if you have a general plan in place, it'll help more than just winging it. You will be able to better help those around you, like your students who are not, that are not from this area. Help them prepare for a winter snowstorm. How many of you got working in your office, well, new faculty or new employees coming, students or full-times, that are from Arizona, that have no idea how to drive in the snow or how to prepare for a winter storm? What can you do to help them prepare? Because some of the things that you prepare in your office can help them also prepare at their apartments and for personal things. So keep that in mind. Remember, everything is going to work out. Now, it may not be how you plan, but things will work out. And this is a big thing. It's okay to color outside the lines. Just because Katrina said this is how she does it, doesn't mean that's how you have to do it. Just because we're doing something in SRR doesn't mean that you're going to do the same thing. For an example, if there is a chemical spill in the Romney, in the chemistry department, they're going to have a different plan than we are because it's not going to impact us. The chances of us having a medical spill or a chemical spill in the Kimball building is very, very low. But it could be that the fumes or whatever could affect us by we shelter in place and we don't go out anywhere on campus and we keep our students here until we get the all clear. So those are the things you need to look at. Is just because this one office does it this way doesn't mean that we have to do it that way, or because so-and-so said that, that's how we have to do it. Every situation is different. Every office is different. Every person is different. And the big thing to remember is to keep calm. This is a big one, and sometimes it's not easy. I will attest to that. When we've gone out on searches and we get hyped up on adrenaline and it's just go, 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 sometimes it's hard to remain calm, and depending on what the situation is. There are so many resources out there that you can find online that can help you come up with your plans. Looking at what we've done, or talking to the university, talking to safety here on campus. Most of our plans are going to go in conjunction with what the university has set up. We are here as an auxiliary to what they have, because they can't cover everything. If something happens, if your office is prepared, you're going to be able to be better off by helping the university, and the university isn't going to have to worry about your office specifically, what, you know, all of your people scrambling at the last minute trying to figure out what's going on. So there's all these different types of things. I want to share an experience with you that I had back in 2015 that has taught me about being prepared and has helped me understand preparation a little bit better. And if we're prepared, like the scripture says, if we're prepared, we shall not fear. Back in November of 2015, I happened to be sitting at home. It was a Saturday evening. I was actually just getting ready to go to state conference. And my husband happened to be working at the temple at the time and was here in Rexburg. And I was going to meet him over at the stake center. And a little bit just before I was getting ready to leave, I heard what sounded like a car door slamming. And then my dogs started barking. And so I didn't know what was going on. I looked out front. There was nobody out front in our yard. So I stepped to the backyard and I looked over to, flipped our back lights on and looked back over to the southwest, and I could see lights over towards the road and the field. And the first thing that went through my mind was poachers again. But then I could hear some yelling. So I started to walk over that way. I felt I needed to. And as I heard more yelling, I asked, is everybody okay? Is everything all right? And a voice yelled back, no, I just hit somebody. My training immediately kicked in and I ran. I was in my dress boots, I was in a skirt, and I ran through my backyard and through my neighbor's backyard. And how I missed holes my dogs had dug was because I had help. And I ran over to the road, met up with the guy that was driving the car. He was trying to get through on the phone to dispatch. He was so shooken up, he handed me the phone. As dispatch picked up, found out it had gone to Idaho Falls' dispatch, 2 counties away. They were having phone problems that night. They immediately put us in touch with Madison's dispatch. I explained the situation to them. They asked me to check for a pulse on the victim. I did not find one. And she told me to begin CPR. And then she told me that ambulance was en route. And so I started CPR. This is something that I have been trained on for years, since I was at girls' camp. I think the only lapse I had in training was when I was on my mission, and a couple of years after that, but I have pretty much maintained that about every 2 years, refresher courses on first aid and CPR. And so I started it. I didn't stop and have to think what I needed to do. I just began. And I sat there and knelt there and did CPR till the ambulance arrived. I don't know how long that was. I want to say at least 10 minutes because of where I live. And the ambulance arrived, and then they took over. Unfortunately, the injuries were so severe she did not survive. But as I looked back later, I realized that because I had been prepared, I had had that training, I did not fear. I just stepped in and my training took over. Like I said, when I ran through our backyard, how I did not find any of those holes, because I can walk out there and just find one without even looking. My ankle always seems to find them. But the Lord blessed me to be able to do that and to do CPR for as long as I did. Because when I have done our refresher trainings every year since then, just the minute or two that we do it in practice, I'm worn out. I cannot believe how tiring it is and how I did that. It had to be the adrenaline and the Lord helping me to do it. But it's because I was prepared. And I know that if you guys are prepared personally for your office, that if something does happen, the Lord will be there to bring it back to your memory of what you need to do. That's the biggest thing right there, is if you're prepared, the Lord's going to help you.